Welcome back, everybody, to another exciting episode of Aaron's Opinion, the podcast for blind people, where we speak about critical issues in the blindness community and all other issues from across the universe, galaxy, and even England. Absolutely. You all remember many years ago when we had a beautiful conversation with Philip Anderson. And basically that episode, which we'll put in the description, and we'll certainly put it put it up for you on YouTube more than likely, was called Philip's Love. We'll get more into that later at the end. But Philip Anderson was wondering if he could come back to Aaron's Opinion to talk about the amalgamation, as you like to call it, of all of your ideas, which are now in this brand new, beautiful podcast called Talking Point Podcast. Philip, you know how much I love hearing your beautiful voice and hearing your delivery and everything you have to share with us about your life and Talking Point Podcast. So basically, I'll turn it over to you. What's going on with your life? What's going on with Talking Point Podcast? Get into it, and the microphone is all yours. I'm going to sit back and relax and listen to your beautiful voice. Go right ahead.
Well, firstly, can I say thank you very much indeed for affording me this opportunity of coming back onto the Aaron Opinions podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honour to have received this invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here today to talk to you. Yes, what has been going on? Well, quite a lot, really. As you may recall, Against the Odds motivational podcast was the original podcast I created about 4 or 5 years ago. And that not necessarily died a death. What happened with that is it was a major experiment and a major new departure for me from my previous work in mainstream radio. And what I was looking to do was to bring together and celebrate the lives of people who had made a big difference. Now, not major difference, like someone had won the marathon or someone had actually brought out some innovative piece of technology that was game-changing, life-changing, etc. These are sort of milestones within people's lives where people had overcome in the face of overwhelming odds. Now, some people are against that notion, that concept, but I think resilience is a very powerful emotion. It's a very powerful quality. And I think it's sadly lacking in today's society. People might disagree, and I'd be glad for you to do so, because that's the whole point of any discussion. It's seeing things from multiple perspectives. So if you know me, I can be a little controversial, and I do like to come at things from multiple perspectives. The one thing I will never say, I'm always right. I don't believe in that. Although people have labelled me arrogant in the past, and again, people are entitled to that opinion. Again, it's how we perceive other people. And sometimes I don't think we always see the big picture. We only ever see what we want to see or what aligns with our beliefs. And therefore, I think you have to be as open-minded as possible to be part of anything that I'm doing, because otherwise it will just be lost on people. And so this new podcast, Talking Point, is not so much new. What it does, it embodies the elements of the old. And I've decided I wanted to do a podcast whereby we celebrated people's milestones, but also look at the changes in innovation, in general business, in general communities, where difference was being made. And looking at some of the controversial topics, some of the topics people are afraid to have because of the general narrative, society's narrative that we're so up against these days. Whereas if you aren't speaking their language, you're classed as a social misfit, you're an outcast. And so I like to do it in a tasteful way. We're not here to despise people or to be overly critical for being critical's sake. That is not what we're about. We tend to do this in the spirit of love and in the spirit of academic integrity. And we look at it through the eyes of critical thinking. And critical thinking tends to embody many perspectives. So, for example, to give you an idea of what I mean by critical thinking, if I was to say to you, university is a good idea, discuss. Now, whose perspectives are we going to be looking at it from? Well, if I was to ask it, say, from a student's perspective, they will give you one view. Ask that from a school teacher's perspective, you'll get a different view. Ask it from a parent, you'll get a different one. An employer, you'll get a different one. And government, you'll get a different perspective. And that's what critical thinking is all about. And that's what I like to try and do as best as I possibly can on Talking Point with whatever topic we are looking at. Now, Talking Point has two sides to it. We have both an epic part of it, and we also have a short component to it. Now, the short component are the single topic episodes, the single mini episodes that we tend to bring out in between the bigger seasons that take a lot more time and energy to research and produce. So the mini episodes tend to be a little bit more frequent, whereas the epic ones tend to be a little bit less frequent. But that's, as I said, because of the time and energy that goes into creating those. One of the mini episodes actually came out very much just a couple of hours ago. And this one's embodying quite an interesting topic. It's looking at the subject of confirmation bias and the whole subject of echo chambers. And again, this whole point of seeing things through a very narrow focus, things that only align with our beliefs, and not looking at the bigger picture. And it can often be to our downfall. So I've called it the price of bias. And anybody who studied psychology will be very familiar with this. But just to give you a taster of what the episode is going to be exploring and how it sounds, check this out. Ever noticed how some people are always right? Speak for yourself, I hear you saying. Like that newly opened cafe, for instance, which they know is going to be grossly overpriced before stepping inside. Or their favourite radio host, whom they believe has been unfairly dismissed without hearing the full story. Funny, isn't it, how some people like to find proof they were right all along, almost as if their brains were wired that way. Well, today we're diving into something which might just explain it. I'm Philip Anderson with another Talking Point Shorts, which, as you know, is a single topic episode with no guests, so you're going to have to put up with me for the next 10 minutes. Can you do that? And like its epic sister podcast, Talking Point breaks barriers and inspires lives. Ready? Let's do it. Hello. How are you? And there you have it. That is the sample opening to my new episode of Talking Point Shorts, which is out today, Saturday the 22nd of February 2025. Now, it's available on your smart speaker or wherever it is you like to consume your audio media. And all you have to do is type in Talking Point Podcast and then my name, Philip Anderson. The reason being, there are several podcasts under the name of Talking Point, right down to the BBC. And it hasn't been patent, this whole name, not that I know of, and I've never been requested to withdraw mine, and neither have all the others who are also using this name. But yeah, you can find us on Pinecast if you want the RSS feed. The RSS feed is available on Pinecast, that's PINECAST.com. And you can just type that, just copy that into your app of choice and subscribe that way. One interesting thing we are looking at for our sort of epic season, which is for the longer episodes of Talking Point, we are actually exploring the barriers to the audio industry. And we're going to be covering about three major areas, and we're looking at technological inequalities, the, sort of the payment inequalities, and we're also going to be looking at several other things too, which is the actual, I'm going to put this one, this is the copyright issues around the barriers as well, and the reasons why only few books ever find their way into audio. We're going to be talking to the Audiobook Consortium, which was set up to try and help facilitate the balance as best as we possibly can between actually providers and sellers. And obviously, from a technical perspective, if you have, say, a disability, or I like to call it access needs and requirements, additional access needs and requirements, you will have obviously come up against one or two hurdles, particularly where software is concerned. If you are working with screen reading technology, as I am, and I'm sure you do too, Aaron, not everything that you are working with, especially these mainstream editors like Reaper or Goldwave, or whilst they've really worked hard to make them accessible, there are one or two barriers that prevent us from getting the full benefit of the software. And the internet is where it's at. Video. Everybody now is going with video on podcasts. Now, I don't know about you guys. I think podcasts are meant to be audio in my book. So otherwise we're creating what we call quasar television. And they've experimented this, have they not, on radio, where they've now put webcams into radio studios. Again, I was so opposed to that. I was thinking, well, hang on a minute. I think it was Alistair Cook, who was a well-known BBC presenter. He did his regular slot on Radio 4 here in the UK called Letter from America. And he basically said, I don't do television. The pictures work better on radio. And I think that's absolutely true when we are thinking about how, our imaginations are developed and shaped through drama, how our concentration is, sharpened through radio because we're having to use our cognition in a way that perhaps doesn't get used when we're watching things and having everything done for us on the telly, where all the answers are already provided for us, where all the fun is taken out of the thinking because of all the fancy graphics, bells and whistles that make everything so appealing. Now, that could be very selfish of me to say that from the other perspective, because some people might say, well, that's okay when you're blind because you are not relying on vision. But a lot of people who have vision, do enjoy radio, do enjoy just the auditory medium of radio and what that can do for us. And podcasts for me are exactly the same. I mean, I've even seen it where people have had podcasts with video included. And what we end up with is just two people sat around the desk talking. But if the podcast is 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes long, and there's no action going on whatsoever, of what consequence is two people sitting around a table going to serve? Well, personally, I would find that, even with sight, absolutely boring because there'd be no activity. Well, imagine if you wanted to pause to scratch your backside, for example. I mean, that would be captured on air. And so you take away all these liberties, and all that. You've got, just let's deploy the imagination and let's keep anything audio as audio and anything visual as visual and keep the two separate. Now, did they not break with that mold when television came out? Well, when it first came out, it was just purely silence and just pictures. Well, that's what the cinema was, more than TV, because we had the silent movies in the 20s and 30s. And then the talkies came along, I suppose, in the late 30s or mid 30s. And that's where all the cinemas changed, and they named them picture palaces, because exactly that's what it was. They were grand places to go, and some very top people were, appearing even at the cinemas. Some of these star actors, especially if they were debuting in whichever country, this particular new film, they would actually appear in person, and they really got to know their audience. And 2,000 plus people in these cinemas, and then TV obviously came on. The BBC sort of came on with BBC One and then later BBC Two, but choice was very limited. But going back to the point of audio and mixing that with the visuals was really interesting. And it did give radio a bit of a run for its money, I have to say. And it did challenge some of the corporates within the industry, especially with the BBC local radio that came on board in the late 60s. But the beauty and the reasons why I think radio didn't suffer unduly back then, with the emergence of television, was we only had a few channels in this country, in the UK. I know America have always had probably a lot more scope than we've got over here. It's been interesting because we only had, 3 channels at most. 2 to begin with, then 3, then probably 4, and then ended up with 5. And then obviously we connected to Sky and various other networks. We've got cable and wireless came on board. 9X, I think, were one of the first pioneers in this area, in this country, along with Sky. And then that really did open up the sort of the door to many other channels. And I think that's, in a way, has it been a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, if I look at the negative side of that, I think it's just created an even poorer imagination, and I think concentration levels have certainly gone down. People have become on what we call a nation of armchair flickers, where, they'll have 1 minute of something on one channel, then, oh no, I'm bored of this, we'll flick over to something else, and focus just seems to be out the window. People can't concentrate on things for more than a few seconds. And again, this is reflected in the music industry. So if we look at the way records have gone, records used to have quite a long intro before even the singing would begin. Now it's wham, bam, right in your face, because of people's concentration. So things have certainly changed, and podcasts have certainly changed. And I was thinking, Aaron, actually, about your podcast, because you're still going. This is still going. Aaron Richmond's opinion, or Aaron's opinion, is still going within 2 or 3 years since I last was on here. And that's all credit to you and your vision, your dedication. And that takes a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of energy to ride with something like that. And especially if you're doing it as you're doing it every week. That is very, 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 very interesting that, you've kept that going. And as I said, all hats off to you. And it brings us on to a very interesting question of frequency and keeping everything topical and relatable. Raises what an interesting question for me, because I know you like to just publish yours as is. And, I like to go with something a little more polished, as I call it. Now, that's not to say one's any better or worse than the other, because I believe there is scope for everything. And there are reasons why people decide raw is preferable to polished or polished is preferable to raw, because everyone's got their own reasons for doing what they do. And there is room for everything, I think. And that's what I love about the whole podcasting world. There is scope, and there's a lot of choice. So it'd be interesting just to get your perspective on this, as we are saying it's Aaron's opinion. So we'll get your opinion on it then. You prefer to do unedited material. You prefer to put out an unpolished podcast as opposed to a polished one. What are your reasons for doing that?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you that that I loved all the points you made. And that I loved everything you've said so far, and that there's a lot to be learned from you. And you're very right. We are never right 100% of the time, and that's a very, very special life lesson that I wish more people would appreciate and would accept. Why am I unpolished? Well, that's fine. I'm unpolished because for the reason that you said, also something that I actually didn't agree with, which is that the reason why you felt, as someone in England, why BBC was really able to maintain, and why radio was able to maintain, even though that there were not a lot of TV channels, which is the reasoning you gave. I would say that's true, but I would say it also might be true that the reason why radio stuck around for so long, and the reason why podcasting is so pervasive and so impactful now, is the exact same reason. Podcasting and radio is the theater of imagination. And when people use their imagination, they love listening. And that's truly why podcasting and radio has stuck around for so long, because people crave imagination. They desire to use their brain and to use their imagination. The other reasoning is I want to be able to create something here at Aaron's Opinion, where 50, 60, 70, 80 years from now, when we're all, as is commonly said, when we're with God, or when we're in heaven, when we're in the heavens looking back on earth, we want to think to ourselves, wow, I'm glad in my lifetime I produced something for future generations. So sure, we're having this conversation now, but it's not necessarily for the now in a philosophical sense. It is for the now, but it's also for the tomorrow, and it's also for the past, because I want to make sure that my fingerprint is in the audio space as someone who created something for the whole world to listen to in the future and in the past, and to be able to come back to it later on and say, wow, we really documented history. We really had a great conversation. Because to me, that's what it's about. To me, it's not about the artistic form of podcasting. It's about giving you the privilege of having a conversation that we can appreciate in the future. So, I mean, I really think
legacy. So it's about legacy.
Oh, yes, legacy, correct, legacy. And yes, you're also 100% correct when you said that. I would say that, yes, for me, it is about the present, but it's also about presenting you with a product that you'll be able to love and cherish as a treasure in your heart in the future. That's also what it's about. And you're very right. It's not your imagination that we live in a country of armchair flickers, as you adorably said. Yes, in American English, we just call those people lazy. We have a special word. We say lazy in your beautiful British English, which if anyone tells
potato.
You're right
I think we
again.
call them couch potatoes.
You're right. I was wrong. You were right. We do call them most people call them couch potatoes. I just call them lazy. You're right. We do call them couch potatoes. You're very right. It does bother me that we live in a society where so many people are unwilling to make a contribution that is appropriate and impactful. And that is very disturbing. At best, it's disturbing. At worst, it's actually bothersome because I wish that more people would come up to my microphone or their own microphone and make an impact that somebody can listen to and love in the future. But,
Do you
not
find
everybody.
that? Honestly, that's interesting. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, please interrupt me. No, no,
Do you
you're not
not?
interrupting. Go ahead.
Oh, brilliant. Well, do you not find then when you are approaching people, do you find it's like pulling teeth sometimes, trying to invite people to come on to your podcast? I mean, have you got lots of people queuing, or do you find as though, well, hang on a minute, if these are individuals who love to be part of an auditory medium like radio
Right.
or podcasting,
Hmm.
where it's all about conversation, communication, that sometimes communication between others to try and get them onto your show, it's so much like hard work.
It absolutely is. It was easy to get you on the show, and it was not. I definitely didn't have to pull your teeth to get you on the show. So you should never have felt that you were a tooth pull to get you on.
Listen, mate, the check's in the post.
Listen, mate. One of my relatives is a dentist, so if you need a tooth to be pulled, let me know because we can pull a tooth if you want. But no, it was definitely not a tooth pull to get you on here, and it's always an honor to have you on, and the fact that you remembered Aaron's opinion from years past, and the fact that you are doing such a good thing. I tell you, I appreciate what you do most of all because I have found, and you've probably noticed the same, that there are actually not a lot of podcasters in England who are really, in my opinion, receptive to us blind people. And there's just not a lot. I mean, I'm sure you're going to prove me wrong. There's not a lot of podcasts in Europe and in England who really are catering to that and are really on board with that. I found that most of the podcasts that most of my audience here at Aaron's Opinion is around the developing world, in countries all over, like such as South Africa, some of the countries in Asia and places like that, in developing world, but typically not as many European people. Europe has not been the primary consumer of podcast medium, so I have typically noticed that. Yeah, but
I'm wondering if that's
sure.
maybe down to this whole subject of integration and perhaps some people, the way they view a program on national BBC radio here
Right.
called In Touch, which is specifically a program for persons with sight loss. And when I speak to people with sight loss, oh, do you enjoy listening to In Touch? Now, I have had one or two commissions accepted on that program in years gone by, which is how I got my foot in the door with the BBC. But when I speak to people about those types of themed programs that are specific, that are niche audiences.
Mm-hmm.
They'll say, I don't want to be a part of anything that's blind because it's separatist, and I want to feel part of the mainstream. Uh,
Right.
this is the reason that I'm hearing why some people just feel as though anything specific that is targeted at one specific sense or sensory impairment perhaps doesn't have that same appeal because it feels as though, oh, well, you narrowed your audience down instantly. Because are you not also wanting people who are sort of non-blind to be part of the Air and Opinion podcast, or do you prefer all your guests to have a sight impairment?
What I prefer is I prefer guests who want to be here, whether they're blind or not. In fact, later today, this evening, it will be in the middle of your night, but later this evening, we'll be interviewing someone who is sighted. So sighted people can come on. Absolutely they do. It's just less of them. Given that we say we're the podcast for blind people, that sort of narrows down the listenership slightly. But no, sighted people can be on the show, and they are. Less of them, but they're welcome. My thing is you have to be ready, and you're ready. And that's what stands out to me. Who's the most ready? Who wants to have the impact? That's what it's about for me. But I also think that in certain cultures in around Europe, people are more private. I think that's a lot of it too. I think the European community is private, and I think they don't want to participate as readily with media. I think there's some shyness, some private, some reserved behavior of the
Reticent, isn't there? Yeah, there's some reticence going on.
there, but that's the European community. The European people are a lot more reserved and a lot more private than other parts of the world, where people in other parts of the world are much more likely to reach out and much more willing to give out too much information, which we've also seen that here at Aaron's Opinion. But also it does vary. Not that we're specifying country to country, which we're not, but I have noticed that each region of the world does respond differently. And I'm sure you've seen the same.
Well, I tell you what really is very, very difficult is I've reached out, as the Americans like to call it. I say contact, but reached out is a nice expression, to people regarding, say, my podcast season on the barriers to the audio world, for example.
Sure.
Now, I've approached different Facebook groups in respect of this that are specifically people with different sensory impairments and other types of access needs and requirements and so on. Finding out really what their barriers have been and how they've managed to overcome them. And have I received any response? Ne point, nothing. Absolutely nothing. I contacted a couple of podcast groups that are specific for people with, say, sight loss. The Jonathan Mosen one, for example, based in Australia. I'm a part of his group, and I'm not here to say, to slate it in any way. I'm just saying I actually did reach out to them, give them an opportunity. What was I met with? Silence. Absolute silence. And yet all these groups say that they're here to offer support. And so when there's a chance for collaboration, that goes by the wayside unless I'm not classed as high profile enough.
And I have a problem with that. And I'll tell you, I will tell you that what you just said sounds vaguely familiar.
I was going to say, does it sound like this? Go on. I'd love to hear what your experience is.
Sure. Well, so I do know who you're talking about. That's fine. I know of that person. I've always wanted to interview him, and he's forever welcome here in Aaron's Opinion. And later we'll talk on Messenger, because if he has a Facebook group, well, I want to be in his Facebook group. That's great. So the most important thing here, though, the takeaway point is, well, why don't you post in our group here at Aaron's Opinion Podcasting Community? Post all your information in that Facebook group if you're not already there. And I forget if you are or not, but if you're there, post your stuff that you're doing in my group. And we'll get some people. We have 2 people in our audience who are muted who would love to talk to you about this, and who will, I promise you, both of them will be on your show, and both of them will be able to make an honest and an outstanding contribution to what you do. So definitely come over to my country, come over to the Aaron's Opinion country. We'll not only will we allow you to post in our group, but I want you to, because I truly appreciate what you do. I also don't fault people, by the way, when we do say things that are controversial. I don't fault people for denying you or denying me. And here's why. I will never force anybody to be on Aaron's Opinion.
Definitely not. No, I won't.
So for that logical reason, I will not force myself. I put it to you like this. Here's me. Here's Aaron's Opinion. I tell people, here's my email address. If you can email me, if you can work with me, I'll work with you. If you won't work with me, that's okay too. So it is, I'm not, again, what I'm saying, we're just having the dialogue.
Yeah.
it is frustrating and disheartening on one hand, but on another, if for some strange oddity reason, if they truly are not interested, if they're genuinely not interested, that's also okay to be genuinely not interested. I would rather someone be genuinely interested than genuinely not interested. So that's, I think, what it is I think that, there's a lot of this interesting behavior, and I have seen it. And sometimes, Philip, it does bother me and does hurt my feelings a little. But I try to tell myself, well, I need to focus on not being offended by what people say. So I'll not worry about that too much. Yeah,
Oh no,
exactly.
I'm inclined to agree with you. Well, everything you've just said there, I do agree with. I suppose the question comes up is, with these people though who are claiming to be, um, you know, there for the good of X, Y, and Z, and then to deny people the right to collaborate, to work with, because they feel, well, this is really, it's a bit of a superiority thing. It could be a power thing. Who knows what the reasons are why people choose not to engage, and yet they're wanting people to engage with them. Well, I see it from this perspective. Engagement's a two-way process. If you want to work with me, then we're going to have to work together, and vice versa. If I want to work with you, then we'll have to work together. It is a collaborative thing. It's not a push and pull, because that creates, ripples and unpleasantness, and it can drive even bigger wedges between you, and we end up being more polarized at than we in the end than we were at the beginning. So
Right.
it is about teamwork and working together. Now, if any of these groups whom I've approached, would love to get off their high horse and stop, as we would say in Britain, come down from up your arse, it would be so much better. And we could really be working together and creating something new. But at the moment, we've got so many different people working in so many different fields, endeavoring our best to make little differences as much as we would like to make bigger ones. It sometimes collaboration could be a way of presenting this united front and showing a touch of solidarity. And to me, that's what community is all about. It's not
Right.
working against one another. What I love about what you do, Aaron, is, you know, and again, I'm being absolutely honest, there is a love to what you do. And there's a lot of fellow feeling that comes out in what you do. And there's a lot of dignity in what you do. The way you speak to your guests, the way you approach what you do, it absolutely smacks of love.
Well, I absolutely love that. And if nothing else, what I love about what you do is just mostly your beautiful accent, your beautiful British English that you speak. I could listen to that wise, as I told you years ago, I could listen to your BBC voice all day. I mean,
Oh,
like that voice, that like your like delivery, your strength in your voice is so soothing to me and so touching and is a perfect voice for a podcast. I mean, you can't get better than that.
well,
People might like my voice, but let me tell you, you have a voice. I mean, you have a face for radio. I mean, really, but yeah,
well,
no,
that's nice
I
of you to say
appreciate
so.
I really do appreciate that. And I think that's truly how you or I or anyone can get the guests we should be talking to is showing the world how much we care. You say
Yes.
showing the world how much you love it. I say showing people how much we actually take ownership. That's the other thing too. You don't know with all these products out there, you don't know how much ownership is actually involved within it. That's another thing. That's a little unknown factor. But yeah, no, you're very, very right. This is a problem that is going on within the industry. I have mixed feelings about it. I understand why things don't work out all the time, but I do agree with you that it does need that people need to climb down from the ivory towers. But then again, then again, I would philosophically say if the only thing that somebody wants to be, if the only place somebody wants to be is the top of their ivory tower, then maybe I don't want them to climb down.
True.
So that's the kind of the way I look at it. I look at it as saying, well,
You're
you
better
know,
off up there.
you're in a sense good. I don't want to talk to you then either. And it's nothing personal, but fine. That's okay. What I'm saying is I understand why you, why you get frustrated and get frustrated by it. But what I'm saying is I'm frustrated by it too. So then I say, fine. If somebody really doesn't want to hear me, then as you say, we're a nation of armchair clickers. Go flick to something else then. If you don't want to listen to what we have to say, which is fine. If people don't want to hear it, that's fine, but don't say unkind things and things like that. That's kind of my philosophy about life. But
Yeah, no,
but
I
what you
agree
have
with
to do is over years and years and years and years, over your lifetime, you have to continuously take ownership and take responsibility of the product that you love. And that's what people will secretly look towards. They won't really necessarily come out and say it as beautifully as you did. And most guests are not as honest as you, or most guests are not as,
controversial.
most guests are not as most guests are not as and I don't even want to say prolific. Most guests are not as blunt as you are. You're very
Feisty, I was going to say.
yes,
A firebrand is probably how I am.
yes. It's interesting that you call yourself feisty. Yes, you'd be we would say in on my side of the pond we would say yeah he's a firecracker. You'd be you're quite a you're or even more you're just a huge character. You have your persona. That most people don't, a lot of people don't have, a lot of people are not you and a lot of people are not me. You're a character. You truly are. But let's delve a little bit deeper. Anybody who in England or in the world who would be a great guest on Aaron's Opinion, you're always welcome to give out my card, give out my contact, as you like to say. And, cause boy, oh boy, I would love to know that I was eventually able to have someone here on Aaron's Opinion who had an influence and in the radio scene there in England. They are so welcome. If you know anybody, if you truly know anyone who worked with BBC or has worked or has some connection to the media, and I mean it in the right way. If you know someone who belongs here on Aaron's Opinion, definitely put them on here. I would love to. I would love it. Absolutely love it. Yeah.
Well, the cogs are turning already, and one or two people are flashing before my consciousness at the moment. So,
Well, good. Well, I don't want. Well, look, I don't want my consciousness to flash. Okay, we don't need flashes. No, there's no need for flash. I don't want stuff to flash.
well, not in that sense, but I was basically saying that
I
the
know what you mean.
individuals were flashing before my or
Oh,
before my mind's eye, so to speak.
okay. Well, good. Well, I felt someone in my podcaster's heart. I felt him beating in there. I felt him right around the corner for another exciting episode. But no, you are so right. So with these long form contents that you do, man, the longer episodes. So are you also reaching out to do like interviews with other people around England? I mean, exactly what are some of your interview things that you do want to do on Talking Point? You did a lot with that in the past where you would interview people in a beautiful way. What do you want to do now with interviews? Mm-hmm.
Well, it will be a mixture of interviews, opinions, and analysis, and that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So for the season we're doing on the barriers to the audio industry, the
Right.
one thing that we are doing is we've got two excellent audio producers whom I've invited onto the program. They've already been interviewed, and that's now in production as we speak. And one has 20 years experience in the audio industry and the other has 12 years. Both are audio book producers. One's had a lot of experience with the BBC and brought us, amongst other things, Doctor Who. So a lot of experience. And we're looking at four major barriers within the industry. And what we're also going to be doing in the meantime is within that, series, we're also going to be chartering the post-production process. Now, the one thing I am not is a trained engineer. Although I'm able to, you know, engineer my own programs, I wouldn't do it professionally for somebody else. Because it would take me longer than perhaps anybody else would do it who was trained. I'm a trained broadcaster and a trained journalist to a degree, but a lot of it again is down to experience. I did have a lot of experience working at a university as well and acquiring a lot of input from courses I've done, etc. But a lot of what I do and how I do it has come about through just years of experience, really. And I'm still not, at the top of my tree. I don't want to be at the top of my tree because like yourself, I see success in a totally different way to perhaps how some people may see success. Some people who acquire a lot of wealth feel as though what goes with wealth is, well, I'd say hardship, but more heartache. But what goes with their wealth is a flashy car, a big house, lots of fancy clothing. Now, to me, that doesn't really suggest success in my book. That just seems as though you've acquired a lot of money and you need to tell the world that you've achieved that wealth. Whereas for me, I think people take the eye off the journey and they don't think the journey is as important as the end goal. Well, if you can see the end goal, and you get there, well, it could be a bit of an anticlimax. Imagine what you learn along the way when you are a part and parcel of a journey, You set off on this holiday, this big vacation, and it may take you several hours to get there. Some people say, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Well, that's because you're not really enjoying the journey for what it is and learning from it as well. If you have the eyes to do so, gazing out and taking in your surroundings and concentrating on things and then having that reflection time afterwards to ponder what you've seen, what it means to you, how it makes you feel, where you see yourself in this, on those little spectrums, so to speak, and how it can enrich your own life. And I've seen this with a lot of entrepreneurs, people who follow these very big names like Elon Musk and, Steve Jobs before he, passed on. And I just feel as though, people are only interested in once they've made it rather than how they got there. And for me, I think that's pretty sad. Unless you've made it big, people don't want to know. Well, if you only want to know me when I've made it big and I've got a lot of money around me, well, as you were saying about those people who, want to stay at the top of their ivory towers, well, perhaps if that's their attitude, then maybe, as you say, they're better off up there, because I don't want them down in my quarter either. And this is where we all have to remember, we're all, if we are, we're all in charge of our destiny. We're all in charge. We're all driving our own life's car or vehicle or chariot, whatever you want to call it. And you can make that chariot as small or as big as you want, and who you want to invite inside that chariot, on as part of your life. You have that choice. You're driving that, you're steering that, you're the one taking it in whatever direction you want. And if you happen to find people who align with what you're doing and you share the same values, then they come aboard. But again, with friendship, I never take my friendships as though, they come with expectations. They come with all these obligations, because for me, it doesn't. I don't seek out friends just because they can do things for me or I'll do things for them. To me, that's not what a friendship is about. If I can be in the company of a friend and a friend can bring out the best in me and make me laugh, or help me to bring out the best in myself because I can be myself rather than trying to, put on this persona that, it's an assumed persona that, someone would like me to be, then really, I would rather be not in that company of that individual if they're forcing me to be something that I'm not. So my friendships are all about, added value, about bringing out the best in each other. For me, that's very important. And just being there for one another. They always say, if you've got a true friend, as if you can call them at 3 a.m. in the morning, and they're not going to tell you to get stuffed. So, I mean, they might, but it depends what mood they're in at the time, if you've had no sleep for about 4 or 5 nights or a week or two. I don't know about you, Aaron, but I do suffer with insomnia and, I have bouts of it where.
So many people have, let me just tell you, I am blessed, for many ways, more than I know. I am blessed without having that problem. In other words, I don't have that problem, but I will tell you, so many people do. Insomnia is a major health problem today. And I have my suspicions about it, which are quite skeptical. I think a lot of it is that our lives are more stressful and active, and our heart rate and our whole physiological system now is very different. But many people suffer from insomnia. That's a huge problem. Yeah.
It is, yeah. And I think it's also down to if you have sight loss, the light doesn't hit the iris the
That
moment you
too.
wake up. And therefore there is a biological, neurological aspect to it. Because obviously when the light hits your iris, it sets your circadian rhythm, which is your 24-hour body clock. So it says, oh, well, now I should be in wake mode. Oh, now it's the dark is approaching. I need to be in sleep mode, for example. And that does help to regulate. A lot of kids these days who hardly ever see the light of day, spending 7 or 8 hours on their phones, and only 10 seconds exercising. And that's probably just walking from the phone, from the sofa to the TV, because the remote's buggered. And they've got to change it over manually.
That is such a long walk. Do you know how long that is to walk across a room just to get a remote? That is so long.
Absolutely.
I nearly couldn't do it. It's almost like it's almost like I don't exercise every day. Actually, I do. And that's one of the tricks to being a great broadcaster, podcaster. You got to include physical exercise and a lot of it every day. That's what gets my creativity going. I got to get my heart rate up. I got to exercise every day of my life. And I do. And I do. I tell my doctors that, and they think it's great. But you're very right. We're having a major, but it's not just there in England. It's here in America too. It's a major health problem with most people, and many people have some major health problem now. It's a big problem. Yeah.
I think our lifestyles have become such that, I mean, I question a lot of, just let me clear my throat, hang on. I question a lot of things really because it's, there are 1 or 2 concerning issues that, that are happening, where I think we've become so emancipated from the natural world. And I often wonder whether this insular society, have really done us a wrong rather than a right, where we rely on the law to solve our problems, which again creates a learnt helplessness within people. Which means if we aren't solving our own problems because we are looking to other people to solve them for us, then we're not developing resilience. We're not strong. Years ago, somebody could say something about my sight loss, and I wouldn't bat an eyelid. Pardon the expression. It wouldn't bother me. And now you've got to be so careful of what you say to anybody for fear of offending.
Yeah. I've noticed that speaking of stereotypes that I've noticed, whether it bothers you or not, I have noticed that from an American's perspective, people in England are overly sensitive. I've noticed that. And when I talk to people from England, I filter a lot of what I usually don't say. With you, I'm not filtering,
Hmm.
but usually when I talk to people from England, I pull back. I'm a lot less aggressive. I'm a lot less blunt. I even sometimes just talk more gently with them because people in England are very offendable people. I mean, I have to be really careful with dealing with people from England. They get so upset and so offended more than almost any other European nation. And it is a lot about the old fashioned properness. But I think, quite frankly, I think we live in a society now where people just like to be sensitive. I think it's a way for people to get attention, really. Now, as the American guy, I have to go with it, but I think it's a secret there. I think they just want attention. And the only way they can get it is if they act sensitive. So,
Yeah,
you
they
know,
do. But what they're also doing is they're using intimidation to dictate what is taught and what is spoken
for
in
sure.
society.
For
And
sure.
and if they don't get what they want, then they bang at the door of the lawmakers and get legislation drawn up to make it legal. And to me, that's nothing short of bullying in my book,
Right. It
because
absolutely is.
it's coercive behavior in the third degree.
Hmm.
Because if I don't agree with you, should I therefore go to Parliament in this country and say, well, I think we need legislation to try and, reverse this thinking because I don't consider it acceptable that Aaron's got a different opinion to me because I'm saying something and he disagrees with it and I want him to accept it. So I'm going to force him to accept it. I mean, is that right?
Course not.
I mean, it's like
But
forced
American
integration.
people, it completely is. But that's what American people really think about people in England. We think that your society in general is very hypersensitive and overly sensitive about everything. But you luckily are not sensitive about certain things. And if you were sensitive, I don't think you would have lasted this long on Aaron's opinion because God knows I'm not sensitive. But it's also
But we were
important.
Birkenstrict to them.
I actually, that's a cute analogy. I wouldn't consider myself what we would say in America is you're a hawk is the animal. We would say you're a hawk,
Right.
meaning you're patrolling. You're always on the uptake. You're always on the aggressor. But that's honestly not true. And actually, I think as you've noticed, I'm actually quite in the right way. I'm quite sensitive and quite attuned to the sensibilities of many of my listeners from around the world. But yes, there are stereotypes about people from England, and that is true. But also American people, though, are far too sensitive, and just there's just too much weird stuff going on. But also we don't have to subscribe to it, just like people don't have to subscribe to our podcasts. I don't have to subscribe to views or weird stuff that I don't agree with, whatever it is.
Absolutely. But do
So
you not think
yeah,
free speech, I mean, free speech is coming back on social media.
completely it is.
X
Mm-hmm.
has brought it back.
Mm-hmm.
Now Meta are bringing it back.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is something that excites me.
Right.
I'm a great autonomous individual.
Mm-hmm.
Like to believe in autonomy, personal
Right.
autonomy. What I don't agree with is when people invade other people's space,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
everyone should recognize that everybody has a right to their own space,
Mm-hmm.
and we should value our own space,
I
but
do.
not to encroach on other people's space and expect them to, you know, uh, them to always agree with you
Mm-hmm.
and you if you don't agree with them. I don't agree with that because that creates conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how does one live alongside? I suppose it's in a way, I suppose it's like operating on a busy highway, as you might call it. We'll call it a motorway here.
Right.
You've got lots of different vehicles, different sizes, different weights.
Mm-hmm.
whether you've got your average Mini or you've got your huge forklift truck.
Mm-hmm.
We're all traveling along the same road, all different colors. And because we've got the laws of the road, we don't have to, apart from observing the rules,
Mm-hmm.
we don't have to engage with the other drivers of where
Mm-hmm.
they're going. But it
Mm-hmm.
could just be that, a particular vehicle or a particular person within that vehicle takes your fancy, and you might try and strike up something. Um, as you get to a service station, and you never know, something may happen, and you end up rendering them a valuable service. You might have a breakdown. You might happen to be passing. You can do one or two things. You can ignore them, or you can, assist. And that could lead to things. Or it could lead you to getting robbed. I suppose it's the chance you take.
Right. Right.
But what I'm getting at really is,
Mm-hmm.
we're all in this big ocean. We're all swimming here, but there is water, space where we can be ourselves. This is our island, so to speak. And, and I think that's where you can start to be yourself. And if there are people who don't agree with what you do and what you say, well, fine, let it be. And don't let it affect you.
It certainly
But
won't. Certainly
but
doesn't.
but how do we get to work with other people and work together?
Well,
Because that's what I would love
basically,
to do.
what tends to happen as we now are towards the end of our conversation, what tends to happen is as people research what we do and as people desire certain things within the podcast algorithm, the right people who are supposed to be listening to you and I will find us because they'll search for us and they'll search for the right things to listen to. We are at the end of the hour, as you said. I do understand it's nearly time for tea, as you would say. Do you want, and it's totally up to you, do you want to allow our guests, there are two of them, and both of them are fellow podcasters and broadcasters, to ask a question? Would you like that, or do you need to, if you genuinely need to go, we'll certainly wrap it up. But if you have another 2 or 3 more minutes, we'll let them come on and ask their question.
Oh, absolutely. I'd be more than happy. I wasn't aware they were available or they're going to be there to pose any questions. But yeah, okay, let's go for it.
This is Latabo from South Africa, the South Africa office of Aaron's Opinion. Go. You have one. I'll give you one question, just one question, Latabo. Go.
Well, let me just say good evening, and well, okay. Just to get to the question, because I heard that I think it's Mr. Anderson, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So I just because I just made some research because I've seen that like your podcast is only on Apple. I think it's Apple podcast, right? So I'm not sure. Like, can we find it on other
I'll get you. You
streaming
know what? I'll
services?
get you more, Latabo. I'll get you more information,
Yeah.
please. So
Okay.
it's evening, and he needs to. We're trying to politely let him go about his day, let him go about his business. So please ask your
No, I
question.
understand.
Please ask your question. Sure,
Okay.
no worries.
But the answer
Okay.
to your
No,
question
I was
is yes,
asking.
it is available on all other platforms. Yes.
Okay. No, thanks. Thanks for that answer.
Very good. Do you have other questions?
No, I don't have any
No,
other
no
questions.
problem. No worries. Thank you. Thank you as always, Latabo. All right, we'll talk later.
No
All
problem.
right. Other one. Let's see here. All right, Preston, another fellow podcaster and radio presenter here in the States. Go. One question. Go, Preston.
Hello there. Good day to you. You're definitely doing good work, and I will definitely enjoy listening. My question for you is, what is going to be your favorite person to talk to in the near future of your podcasting journey? Short and sweet.
Wow. There's an interesting question. Who would I like to interview that I haven't interviewed already?
Yep.
Well, I think my topics tend to determine the types of guests I'm going to be inviting on. So whereas I'm not just looking for guests anymore, I allow my subject matter, whatever that topic happens to be, to determine the guest that I'm going to have on the program. So I was very happy to have quite a reputable audio producer to be part of my next season of podcasts. As I mentioned, Morrison Ellis, you can check him out. And he is also part of the Neil Gardner Association or company. And together they've actually brought out Doctor Who in audio drama. And they're big, big players. And to have them on my podcast is an absolute coup. But in terms of any other big names, would I be interested in having? Elon Musk. I find him an absolute fascinating character. I think he's
I'll
an
let him know.
absolute.
I'll text him.
Please do.
We'll put the check right away. We'll put that check right over there.
Well,
sure.
he and I have a lot in common, and I share his values. I share his vision.
Are you sure?
I do. I think in a lot of ways, I like his creative imagination.
Me too.
I think he's got sound business ethics, although I say sound. I'm thinking back to his PayPal days, and perhaps I should withdraw that.
And for the record, you brought that up, not me. I just have to make that sound.
But by the time one of these major things occurred, where my son had over £18,000 of his PayPal money frozen for no reason, it took 2 years to get it back. I think Elon Musk had already flown the nest at that point and was no longer part of PayPal. But they were absolute money-hungering monsters. And I've heard of so many other people. It took 2 years on my behalf to get that money back. And I fought long and hard with one of the big bureaus in this country. And I can honestly say they paid it back with £3,500 worth of interest. And you know what? We didn't even refuse that. We didn't appeal it, but they weren't prepared to give him his PayPal status back. But you know what? He couldn't give two hoots.
Right.
Absolutely. I understand.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah. Thank you to both Preston and Latava.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that was, as always, incredible.
All right, so it's definitely good to meet you, sir, and I'll definitely we'll follow your show, and we'll be on here at iStream Radio all the time. So
absolutely.
Oh, bless you. Well, look, it's a pleasure
to
meet a fellow broadcaster. And just to mention, if you're looking for my podcast, be sure to put in my name along with Talking Point, because if you don't put Philip Anderson with it, you'll end up with lots of other talking points.
Makes sense. I was about to ask that. So
yeah,
good to know.
Yeah. So Philip's got one L. I have suddenly gone onto YouTube. I never thought I'd ever see the day where I ended up on YouTube, but I just basically have it all regulated via an RSS feed. So Pinecast is our host. Okay. And we have our own website as well with the podcast name associated with it. So it's talkingpoint.site. And you can go to our website where you'll have a lot more information about what we do and so on and so forth. We have our own Facebook page, Talking Point Podcast 0, because some other bounder's already got the name. So we have to stick a 0 on the end of that. So yeah, we're looking for people to like that and get involved. It's a good way to keep up to date with what we're doing. And we're also on LinkedIn. So yeah, we've got quite a presence. And we're always looking for new topics as well. And new people to interview. So if any of you two guys who very kindly asked me questions today would like to pop any topics over or feel as though you've got a story to tell, let me hear it. I'd be very happy to, engage with you.
Absolutely. And we'll definitely connect in a few minutes offline, Philip, about getting all those social plugs, as we say, and getting your description set up. But absolutely, yeah, we'll just, as we say, click the link in the description. But as I said, and I still meant it 3 or 4 years ago, whenever you came to the show, I think it was around 3 years ago, when you came the first time. When you came the first time, I meant it when I told you you're forever welcome in the Aaron's Opinion family. And now that you came today, I mean it again. You're always welcome in the Aaron's Opinion family. It's been an absolute honor and thrill to have your character part of our audio landscape. So you are so welcome. All right, well, let's connect off air and keep bouncing these great ideas off each other. But definitely, we will certainly keep talking about this and things like that. So until then, though, until next time, Philip, you have a wonderful, safe and healthy evening over there in England. And until next time, as we like to say, help one person today, help 1 million people tomorrow.